Dear critical thinker, when the existentialism thoughts kick in, how do you cope? The one where you ask yourself why you're here without your consent whatsoever, exposed to the biggest trials of emotional and physical endurance. Because I do know you have these moments. I want to know if you ever think about purpose and meaning and that flame that they all say we're supposed to have inside. Is that meaning attained by connection, service, power? Does your search for meaning ever touch the realm of labor? Is your part in society played by the job you carry out? Well, in answer to these questions, I bring you I Hate My Job. So, welcome you, thanks for tuning in. Now that we passed the gloomy intro, yeah I know, sorry not sorry, I'm dramatic like that. I'll make sure I keep it light and straight to the point from here on out. So today I want to reflect on these questions. Is it possible to reform the workforce? Can we merge our lazy demanding side with a dedicated, hardworking, overachiever side? Can the search for meaning save the consumerist system? This episode was partially brought up by my own personal experience and partially by the phenomena we've been seeing taking place around the world. With the rise of the home office phenomena, the Great Resignation, and the pandemic and its fatal consequences, the workforce is drastically and irreversibly changing. In this episode, I will be doing a bit of commentary on some trends we're seeing online, and I'll try to come up with a solution to the problems people cannot stop pointing out. This being said, we'd be nothing if we didn't question, or if no one would raise an eyebrow and make a fuss from time to time. So complaining is embedded in our system and we might as well turn it into something productive. If you haven't been living under a rock, you'd notice by now these ongoing trends of the I don't dream of labor all the way to how I made 6 figures in 3 months. How is this connected? Well, there's a general discontentment with the job market and overall working condition, and it's painfully obvious. So let's break this down into chronological itsy bits. Part 1. Incoming updates. One big piece of this giant mess cake is the Great Resignation. Now, while most people would say this is a revolution against labor and people are looking for freedom from society, what is actually happening is mostly a reaction to working conditions. Meaning the movement is being caused by employees moving from one job to the other, looking for better payment and benefits, and not exactly a jump out of the workforce entirely. Contrary to popular belief, there is no shortage of workers. Society is not trading 9-to-5 jobs for a hippie, sustainable, jobless life. I guess we'll get there sometime. Quoting a recent article from Forbes, the Great Resignation, as at times been misunderstood as the idea that most people are leaving the workforce entirely. And while that's true in some cases and for very different reasons, the economic data is really led by low-wage workers job hopping up to higher paying gigs. So all of this will be linked below so you can check for yourself, but I would say for sure that there's been a change in our priorities and value system when it comes to finances and stability. Generally speaking, we now see the possibility of higher payment, home office flexibility, and working conditions in general, which led us to be more demanding when it comes to jumping into a new opportunity. However, we're not just quitting one job and call it a day. What most are looking for is definitely higher payment, but also a more meaningful career or job. In the age of information, we are bombarded with so many options and success stories, and after some careful research and networking, you can easily do the math and see if you're being screwed over or not. Also, you get to see what else is out there and how to get it. So this was the context we needed. We want more money, more meaning, and less bullshit. Got it. To sum it up, we're still playing the Matrix game. We want in, but with some changes. As mentioned so many times on this podcast, meaning is the buzzword that won't vanish. This seems to be a consequence of the industrialized world. We started with jobs for service and labor, but it rapidly escalated to shit jobs versus bullshit jobs. So, by definition, shit jobs are the ones no one wants to do. either because of low payment, terrible working conditions, or because they're highly demanding physically and mentally. So it's also highly subjective, as we're all willing to sacrifice different things in life. Now, bullshit jobs is a term officially coined by anthropologist David Graeber in his 2018 book precisely titled Bullshit Jobs. In the book, he proceeds to explain how our capitalist economy has ruined the chance of a jobless world by creating a whole new range of industries that are virtually useless. From financial services or telemarketing, or the unprecedented expansion of sectors like corporate law, academic and health administration, human resources, and public relations, these are examples of bullshit jobs according to the author. Because he does classify them as useless, he concludes that the issue clearly isn't economic, but rather moral and political. However, according to an empirical critique of Graeber's theory on BS jobs, alienation is not BS, the authors show how there's no empirical data supporting Graeber's theory actually, saying that there is some dissatisfaction in the workforce, but up to only 5 to 7% of people feel like their jobs are useless. So this article actually goes on to explain that we're dealing with what can be explained by Marx's writings on alienation, and not on the jobs being meaningless. It all boils down to social relations of work and the conditions employees deal with. And this just goes to show that just because a topic becomes trendy and receives a ton of attention, it might not be #facts. Now let's pause here a bit. Some things are indeed undeniable. Admin jobs, law, and marketing exist because our economic system and societal organization is the way it is. If we were to trade a capitalist world for a communist one, these industries would become obsolete. However, to claim that technology could have been used entirely towards a jobless world where all humans would have the freedom to enjoy life and do whatever they feel like doing is quite of a big stretch. I believe personally that there's a certain naivete when assuming humans can find a way to coexist in harmony and self-organize when there's no political and economic system in place. And for this to be in place, hierarchies must exist, services have to be provided, and wealth distribution and management have to exist as well. Now, whether the system is more capitalist, socialist, or communist, it doesn't really matter here. You choose whatever suits you best. My point is, however you run the country, or the world for that matter, emotions and feelings cannot be the decision makers. Bullshit or not, that's entirely up to each individual to decide. Education is adored by ones, hated by many, however it still is one of the biggest foundations of society. If the service feels meaningful to you, while also contributing to society, then congrats, you're an active participant of the world. Do whatever you think is best with it, use it to your own advantage, or complain about it and go live off the grid, I don't care. So, anyways, this same feeling that David Graeber evokes, and again, this is obviously something that's very current and that I think many people feel, and this is also the reason why his book was so famous and so quoted and appeared in more than 900 research articles. And again, just to show this, how prevalent this is, I actually have some examples of on-screen representation of the feeling or the revolution or the dissatisfaction with the workforce. So on the lazy/anti-work worker, we have shows like Broad City, The Office, Sorry to Bother, the movie, or even The Matrix. And on the opposite end, the examples of the overworked employee, we have Squid Game, Office Space, the movie, and even Silicon Valley. So what seems to be the problem here? The best way I can use this recurrent type of commentary is that people do not seem to enjoy their jobs, or the workforce in general, to be honest. Understandably, due to working hours, career pressure, income and class mobility, etc. There's lots of flaws to point out, and I will never deny that. But then again, if the system is broken, should we repair it or tear it down? Well, that's what leads us to part 2. Why a jobless world is no solution. As you can probably tell by the way I'm framing this episode, I honestly believe we are better off with some sort of organized system, or I mean that there is a system at least. And granted, I could be pessimistic or just incapable of futuristic vision, but all I can see is that we don't tend to deal with very well with total freedom. We tend to engage in erratic behavior because of the lack of consequences. We defy authority just for the sake of it, the sense of community tends to diminish, and most importantly, the search for meaning and belonging actually tends to decrease, assuming we're being provided with all of the essentials to survive, of course. So, this is similarly to extreme oppression what generates revolution. I think chaos can be originated in both boredom and overstimulation. So I think we'd be better off with a reformed workforce in a way that we get to explore more meaningful jobs, actively participate in society, and still feed our innate curiosity and competitive nature. Then how the hell can we implement such changes? Because this is a lot. And this is where I'm trying to convey in part 3, what's the solution? So after a lot of research and thinking a lot about if this would be actually viable or not, I came up with 3 to 4 different approaches that could potentially better the situation. One is definitely lowering the working hours. So the question is though that are we able to get past the low working hours that the Netherlands, Germany, Norway, and even France already have? So this is just to say that it's not a novel idea. Of course, it's possible to implement, but then again, according to each country's wealth and freedom in their systems. But given that we've seen that so many countries, especially Northern European countries, are able to implement this, can we also broaden this to the rest of the world? If we are able to do that, to what extent can we do it? So, after some thought, as I said, fewer working hours does actually not mean that less work has to be done, right? So, therefore, the business profitability is reduced while competitors would gain force. So, the more technology we have, the more we can get done in less time. However, the more technology we are provided with, the more you consume and the faster the world runs. So even if the same amount of work gets done, being completely out of the office for a business day injures the sales. So this is also highly dependent on the job industry, of course. For example, consumer goods demand way more availability and continuity than office or corporate functions. So even though we can lower the working hours, I believe we would always end up reaching this capitalist threshold, if you may. So number 2. Second approach to this problem would be to maybe merge the rebellious side that we have, the one that's against the system, to the search for meaning, all the while actively contributing for a better society. I don't know, just a thought. The more I read about this topic, honestly, the more I'm convinced that we do need jobs. As humans, we use work to explore creativity, social interactions, dignity, intellectual capability, and so much more. Even though we can get these from other sources, work has always been the one we choose by default. It's like the ultimate challenge that we willingly take on. So ideally, we would live in a world where we could explore this by focusing on our capacities and necessities and apply them where society needs it the most. And even though we've come a long way and have truly conquered this freedom in the modern world, to a certain degree, there's still social disparity, bias, and difference of opportunity. So I don't see this issue as a lost cause though. If social issues keep being addressed to ensure equality of opportunity, we are looking towards a future of increased meaning. Awareness becomes more prevalent the more we are financially stable and have our basic needs met. So, by leveling education and healthcare systems, the population would increasingly focus their efforts on man's greatest goal, purpose. So, another way we could actually eradicate the issue maybe would be number 3, converting cultural capital into economic capital. So this one is kind of a tricky one, but I'll do my best. So, one thing that came to mind when trying to come up with possible solutions for the lack of meaning in the workforce was the relation between cultural capital and economic capital. But then again, what is cultural capital? Let's break it down. In the field of sociology, cultural capital comprises the social assets of a person. That means education, intellect, style of speech, even style of dress. And all of these promote social mobility in a stratified society. So I think this is where the disconnect between us and labor happens. Education only makes sense to be pursued if the economic capital can be attained down the line, right? But without economic capital in the first place, without being rich, we lack opportunity to enrich our social capital. As confusing as this might sound, this is exactly the perpetuation of social mobility that modern generations keep complaining about. Be born rich and you'll have infinite options to assure your personal capital on all fronts. Be born poor and you'll have to first attain financial power so that you can then invest in cultural power. So my suggestion here is to maybe facilitate the pursuit of cultural capital in the first place, making it way more valuable economically as well. This way, the foundation of stratification is education, personal development, creativity, and expression, and the building blocks are the financial means, not the other way around. Given that nowadays anyone can get infinitely richer and move up the social ladder, I suggest that this only be possible when accompanied by equivalent cultural capital. Extreme? Yeah, maybe a bit. And last but not least, we have number 4, learning about your job and the world. So while I was doing this research again, I noticed the questions are usually, do you think, believe, feel your job is meaningful? Or some sort of variation of this. And note how the emphasis will always fall under the personal emotion towards the job and not on the reality of how the job fits in the system. Meaning, two individuals can classify the same job entirely differently. This is obviously dependent on their political views, personal values, their knowledge of the industry, and their knowledge of the overall economic system. Well, take the famous lawyer example. This is a job that we can all agree came into existence due to the need for law obedience, hierarchic organization, and to some extent morality. And granted, I'm not a lawyer. Some philosophers actually point this as an example of what we don't need, since the root of all evil is capitalism and it should end. So this would be then a useless profession. However, you and I, just saying, could support a more moderate view, maybe, not necessarily being in favor of the abolishment of capitalism. Our values do not clash with the current economic system. Therefore, we can still find meaning in law careers. Like many others, there will be some redundant bureaucracy involved, but those are not the majority and can still be worked on in order to better the system. So, in conclusion, I believe studying economics, politics, and social sciences is fundamental in order to value each of our professions, as well as to see when we are going down the path that does not align with our values. To sum it up, I see that the smartest approach is maybe to combine the following methods. Lower the working hours in corporate functions, challenge the current organization of the workforce, and restructure it by implementing more automation, less bureaucracy, and more individual responsibility and autonomy. And finally, that workers do their own assessment of values and priorities and actively navigate the job market as they gather experience and progress in their career. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people have to compromise and accept a demanding job with lower payment so they can implement their next step. But as mentioned above, if the education and healthcare access becomes more leveled, we're putting in place a foundation for more people working better jobs and having more options. Anyways, this is a highly sensitive and complex topic. I'm not completely confident this is remotely close to a solution, but hey, it's just my attempt on it. As always, every article and source I mentioned will be linked below, so go ahead and check. They're quite interesting. Let me know if this is somewhat helpful and informative. I would really love some input and your vision of this issue. Well, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and until next time, farewell, critical thinkers.
Something